Alright, hello, welcome back everybody. PayPal and Patreon are down below if you want to support me. Only do so if you actually can. So the OPEC production cuts that have been in place for a number of years now are officially over for most members at least. Saudi Arabia, you may remember, already announced a few weeks back that regardless of what decisions they make as a group, that Saudi Arabia themselves will be continuing their own production cuts indefinitely, which is a surprise to hopefully no one, as Saudi Arabia kind of needed the OPEC cuts as a reason for why they would be perpetually not holding their 10 plus million barrel per day plateau, and why they would be, continually holding more closer to 9 for the foreseeable future until eventually then lowering it even further. That reason being because their field reserves inability to actually continue maintaining a 10 plus million barrel per day plateau that's approaching around 2032 or so under the previously ongoing, now ended with the exception of Saudi Arabia, production cuts. They had been maintaining around 9, or they were more frequently below 9, usually between 8.9 and 9, sometimes going down towards 8.8. This time they came in at 8.95 million barrels per day. Most of the remaining members of the group, as I've said in the past, were already not really obeying the production cut orders anyways. And now with them restoring production, even Nigeria was actually violating their set quota. So the list of members who were obeying the orders was growing pretty thin. So we had to come to the point recently where the only two members that were really actually obeying Saudi Arabia's orders other than Saudi Arabia themselves were Algeria and Kuwait, with Algeria having peaked at 1.4 million barrels per day a while back and having declined down to, capability wise, somewhere close to 1, but still above it. And under the orders, they were supposed to hold down around 900, and they have pretty consistently held there. Most recently coming in now at 912,000 barrels per day. And Kuwait, the one other still obedient member who would otherwise hold a 3 million barrel per day plateau, they were initially ordered to hold down at 2.6 under the cuts, but then instead down to 2.4, most likely, I would assume, to cover for some of the disobedience of other members. And so they've been pretty consistently holding at 2.4 since they were lowered down to that, this time coming in at 2.41 million barrels per day. The two primary disobedient ones, the biggest disobeyers, Iraq and the UAE, Iraq would otherwise be up close to 5 in present day, but because of dispute issues with Turkey about an export pipeline that goes through Turkey, they had been constrained down to 4.4 or so, and under the production cuts, they were ordered to go down to 3.8, and a few times they casually lowered themselves down to about 4, opting, it seems like they were going to go down to 3.8. Then at the last minute, they would turn around 180 and go back up to 4.4. And they were at the bottom end of one of those descents this time and were right at 4 million barrels per day. The UAE was the other primary disobedient one. They were supposed to be down at either 2.7, I think, or it might have been 2.8. And they consistently fluctuated between 2.9 and 3 instead. And in the last few months, it looks like they apparently decided to just go ahead and crank everything up regardless, which that plus Nigeria no longer even listening over the last few months as well might have been part of what internally pushed the decision to just do away with the officiality of the cuts. So over the last couple months, apparently, according to the OPEC obedience balance sheet, the UAE just went full throttle and has jumped up to between 500 and 600,000 barrels per day above what their quota was, which, like I said, was either 2.7 or 2.8. So that puts them up to between either 3.2 or 3.3 million barrels per day. And Nigeria, as I said, also technically entered into disobedient status in just the last few months, as they, in the past, had held at some points a 2 million barrel per day plateau, which, given their remaining oil reserves and the state of their fields, they probably still could until close to 2040. But because of a variety of things, everything from terrorist attacks to oil pipeline theft operations to just internal corruption and redirection of oil and gas industry funds that would otherwise get reinvested into oil and gas infrastructure maintenance, their production capabilities slipped all the way down to about 1.3. And recently, last year, potentially to also compensate for other disobedient members' disobedience, their quota was adjusted down to 1.3. However, they restored a fair bit of their capabilities very recently over the last couple months, and they were not supposed to go back up, even though they restored those capabilities, but they ignored those demands and just went back up anyways to around 1.5. Last time in particular, I think they got up to 1.54 or 1.55. They've They've seen a slip this time back down to 1.47. Libya is technically exempt from production cut quotas anyways, because their situation is a bit unpredictable, as the civil war has, flipped an on and off switch back and forth a number of times over the last almost 15 years now. But in recent months, since the second half of last year, they have been managing to restore some of their former production capabilities and have finally been able to push themselves further back up above 1.1, up to now around 1.4 million barrels per day. This time in particular, they're coming in at 1.41. Venezuela, one of the other ones, exempt, as they are collapsed from who they used to be. Their 3 million barrel per day plateau collapsed when the country collapsed in the later 2010s. And with the help of Chevron primarily, they were able to restore a fair bit of it from 400,000 barrels per day back up to just over 1 million at 1.03 million barrels per day. However, the new U.S. administration has now barred Chevron from doing anything further to aid Venezuela. So Venezuela's oil production is about to tank down again, obviously. And Iran now, or rather up until now for the last few years, free from the prior sanctions, has been able to, or has been trying to, restore their prior 4 million barrel per day plateau, but they found themselves coming up short of it as their fields are so degraded from massive off and on production swings and just the age and maturity of the fields altogether that they require massive amounts of natural gas reinjection to keep them pressurized. So instead of getting back up to their 4 million barrel per day plateau, they've only really been able to return to around 3.2 or 3.3, this time coming in at 3.31 million barrels per day. And they might, because of the new administration, be about to come under sanctions again. All right, that is it for this one. Thank you, everybody, for sticking around and listening. PayPal, Patreon, and the YouTube membership button thing are all down below if you want to support me. Only do so if you actually can. There's a link in the description to a Google Drive with these graphs and all kinds of other graphs about all kinds of different things. There's also a link to my cat's YouTube channel in the top pinned comment. May God bless and protect all of you, and I will see you all around next time.